After Carleton III's death, his successor Monfred V gained a great victory for the Stormlands at the Battle of the Bronze Gate against the Holy Brotherhood of the Andals, but this victory came at the cost of his own life. Despite this victory, Andal warriors kept on sailing to the Stormlands, and the island of Tarth was the first region of the Stormlands to fall to the Andal invaders. The Isle of Estermont was the next to be subdued, and then the Andals would even establish a hold on Cape Wrath itself. The Rainwood would also have been taken if it had not been for the brilliance of King Baldric, the first Durrandon, who set Andal warlords against each other. In later years, another Storm King called Durin the 21st chose to seek out the Children of the Forest in order to gain their help against the invading Andals. King Durin was able to form an alliance with the Children of the Forest, and this alliance was called the Weirwood Alliance. The Weirwood Alliance was able to defeat the Andals at the Battle of the Black Bog, the Battle of the Misty Wood, and the Battle of the Howling Hill. All these three battles enabled King Durin the 21st to stay the decline of his house. Near 30 years later, King Cleodin I Durrandon made an unlikely alliance with three Dornish kings, and this helped the Firstmen to gain a massive victory over the Andal warlord called Drox the Corpsemaker at the Battle of Slane. All these great victories did not hinder Andal invaders, however, for more kept coming to the Stormlands, and in the end, diplomacy proved to be a better solution than endless wars. In this, King Maldon IV took an Andal princess to wife, and his successor, King Durin the 24th, who was dubbed as the Half-Blood, did the same. Under the reigns of these two kings, Andal warlords married the daughters of Firstmen lords, and Andal princesses married Firstmen lords in return. But Andal warlords were granted lands and castles only after they had sworn fealty to House Durrandon. Near a century after King Durin the Half-Blood's death, King Ormond III became the first Storm King to worship the Seven, setting aside the old gods in the process. But the gods' wood in Storm's End was not destroyed. With the Firstmen and the Andals united, the Storm Kings would try to extend their realm. King Durin XXX was among the first Storm Kings who wished to extend the power of his house after the integration of the Andals and the Firstmen in the Stormlands. But though King Durin XXX invaded Dorne twice, he was pushed back by Princess Nymeria. Other more wise Storm Kings chose to look north and east in order to extend their realm, and in this, the Stormlanders were more successful. King Arlen I Durrandon, remembered as the Avenger, extended the boundaries of his kingdom to the banks of the Blackwater Rush and the headwaters of the Mander. 50 years after these conquests, Arlen the Avenger's great-grandson, Arlen III, conquered the entire Riverlands for House Durrandon, and his reign was the apex of the power of the Durrandon kings. For after his death, the Storm Kings would begin their slow but steady decline, for they lacked the manpower to maintain such a large kingdom. Throughout the 3 centuries, the Durrandon kings ruled their empire that stretched from the islands of Tarth and Estermont in the Narrow Sea to the castle of Seaguard on the Sunset Sea. They faced endless rebellions, especially in the Riverlands, where their rule had never been accepted. During the reign of King Eric Durrandon, the Riverlands were lost to Harwin Hardhand, who, with the Ironborn, took the Riverlands from the Storm Kings. King Eric would also face attacks from the Dornish and the kings of the Reach, who attacked the Stormlands in order to raid and pillage or gain lost territory. King Eric's son, Arlen V Durrandon, tried to retake the Riverlands from the Ironborn, but he was killed in the effort. After King Arlen's death, the writing was on the wall for House Durrandon, for their power had greatly diminished after they had lost the Riverlands. King Arlen's successor, Argilac I Durrandon, remembered as Argilac the Arrogant, halted the decline of his house for some time by turning back a Dornish invasion, and a decade later, King Argilac took part in a war in the disputed lands, fighting alongside the Mirish people against an invasion from Volantis. 20 years later, King Argilac stopped yet another invasion into the Stormlands, when at the Battle of the Summerfield, Argilac killed King Garce the 7th Gardener, who had wished to conquer the Stormlands. However, none of these great victories earned King Argilac the power needed to stop the real threat to his rule, which was Harrenhal and the Ironborn. At this time, King Harren the Black's monstrous castle of Harrenhal was near completion, and King Argilac was afraid that Harren would try to conquer the Stormlands after Harrenhal was completed. So King Argilac tried to get into an alliance with Lord Aegon Targaryen by offering the hand of his only daughter, Princess Argilla Durrandon, to Lord Aegon in marriage. King Argilac also offered Lord Aegon all the lands east of the God's Eye as part of the marriage pact. If Lord Aegon had agreed to this marriage pact, King Argilac would have gained a powerful buffer between his kingdom and that of King Harren the Black. But Lord Aegon turned down this marriage pact because the lands King Argilac was offering were not his to give up, and Lord Aegon had no need of a wife, for he was already married to both his sisters by this time. Lord Aegon instead made an offer of his own by offering his closest friend and bastard half-brother, Orys Baratheon, to marry Princess Argilla, and he demanded the lands surrounding Blackwater Bay as dowry. When these terms were delivered to Storm's End, King Argilac considered them as a great insult, and he cut off the hands of the emissary Lord Aegon had sent to deliver his terms, sending them back to Dragonstone with a message that read, "These are the only hands your bastard shall have of me." However, this was the provocation Lord Aegon needed to start his conquest of Westeros, and he would send his sister wife Queen Rhaenys and bastard half-brother Orys Baratheon to subdue King Argilac and the Stormlands. A warrior to the heart, King Argilac chose to fight the invaders, rather than lock himself up in House Durrandon's ancient fortress of Storm's End. Though King Argilac and his army fought valiantly against Aegon's forces at the Battle of the Last Storm, Queen Rhaenys's mighty dragon Meraxes proved too formidable for the Stormlanders to overcome, and the Targaryen forces were eventually victorious. King Argilac was killed in single combat by Orys Baratheon, who was the same bastard that he had mocked, and King Argilac's death marked the end of the male line of House Durrandon. But his daughter, Princess Argilla, remained defiant as she locked up Storm's End and crowned herself as the Storm Queen. But she was betrayed by the guards of the castle, who delivered her naked to Orys Baratheon when he and Queen Rhaenys arrived at Storm's End. Rather than taking part in Queen Argilla's humiliation, Orys Baratheon covered her up and spoke to her about her late father's valiant end. Later on, Queen Argilla bent the knee to King Aegon, but the conqueror granted Storm's End and the Stormlands to his bastard half-brother, Orys Baratheon. Lord Orys would go on to marry Lady Argilla Durrandon, and their marriage ushered in House Baratheon as one of the great houses of Westeros, while it simultaneously marked the end of House Durrandon, which had been one of the greatest houses of the First Men. However, Lord Orys Baratheon would honor the Durrandons by taking both their sigil and words for his own new house. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment and subscribe to the channel.